Hey, I want to welcome you to another edition of the P3D Podcast. A reminder that the P3D Podcast, the 3D, stands for Discover and Respond, Develop and Demonstrate our relationship with Jesus. This is the strategy by which the Passage Church accomplishes the vision. And so each time on the P3D Podcast, we try to talk about these things, talk about disciple making in some form or fashion. And today we've got a guest with us. It's Jarret Hamilton. He's the pastor at Generation Church over in Clayton. Jarret, welcome to the podcast. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about Generation Church, about your family. Just give us an introduction.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Matt, for having me. I pastor Generation Church in Clayton, over right close to the downtown area, and I've been married for almost 25 years. We've got 3 kids, and we have planted 2 churches now. One in just outside of Toronto, and then this one here in Clayton. We started in February of 2015, over kind of closer to where Flowers Plantation is, and then we moved closer to downtown, which is ultimately where we would like to stay and where we'd like to do the majority of our ministering. Our hashtag is for Clayton NC, and so we want to be about what's going on downtown, the businesses, the residents, and just being the voice, hands, and feet of Jesus in that area collectively as a congregation.
That's good stuff. And so we want to talk a little bit about today. Jarret and I serve together with a group of pastors called the Liberty Church Network and trying to help pastors. Tell us a little bit about Liberty Church Network, what it does, the purposes of it, kind of some things behind Liberty Church Network.
Yeah, so Liberty Church Network exists. It's about disciple making. And so the vision of helping people become disciple making followers of Jesus was very much a connection point to us as a church and to me as a pastor, and I know you as well, Matt. And so Matt, you and I were both a part of the one that met in Raleigh, kind of the original one, the OG. And then we sensed the desire and the calling to start something like that for pastors in Johnston County over close to where we are. And so now we meet monthly. We always talk about disciple making. Some of the things we never talk about. We don't ever talk about how many people showed up at your church on Sunday. That doesn't really matter. It's not about how many people are in the building. It's about what are we doing to raise up, mobilize, and send out the people that do show up, that want to be disciples, that make disciples. And so LCN, or Liberty Church Network, that's what we care about, and that's what we focus on when we get together.
All right, that sounds good. So when we think about this, I think for too long in churches in America, there's been a kind of a competitive spirit, both within the leadership of the church and within the members of the church. Yeah. And I'm not sure where that originated. Maybe it originated in softball leagues. I'm not sure where that came from. But and so for pastors like you and I and other pastors in the area to cooperate the way that we do to accomplish the mission is really, really important. Tell us a little bit about your heart and kind of your thought in that.
We are a part of what you and I call the Big C Church. Generation, Passage, Clayton Crossings. I'm trying to think of Scott Bolton's church. Not Michael Bolton, Scott Bolton, and
White Oak.
White Oak. We're all small pieces of a much bigger puzzle, and so ultimately the goal is for the kingdom to win. And so, if there's a win at Passage, then Generation can celebrate that, because ultimately that's a win for the kingdom. And so my heart is to hang with guys like you, to hang with other like-minded guys that go, we're not competing against each other, we're on the same team, we're all working to accomplish the same goal, and we have the same mission. So instead of fighting over people and feeling threatened by each other's successes, let's celebrate those together, because ultimately when Passage wins, Generation wins, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I think when we consider the mission that we're on, there is way too much at stake for us to be territorial over people or where we live and those kind of things. And our church is a part of the LCN. We are part of another network that's over in the eastern part of Wake County with some pastors over there, just trying to do life with pastors, encourage one another, live on the mission. Because you said a win for Generation is a win for the kingdom, which Passage Church is a part of, which is a win for the Passage Church. Exactly. And we want our people thinking that way as they go out into the workplace and interact, because they need people on their team in their workplace. And if those people happen to go to Generation or to another church, hey, let's team up and let's be on mission in the workplace.
Yeah.
One of the things you guys do well at Generation is thinking through getting folks in your church to live on mission where they are. What are some things that you've seen, or some success stories you've seen in your church of people really adopting the mission to take the mission of Jesus into their workplaces or into their neighborhoods?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot. We elevate the mission constantly. It's in front of our people regularly, and it's something we try to do. We try to resource them with things to, whether it's to keep the mission in the front of your mind, or tools and resources that can help you as you try to live that out. And one of the things we talk a lot about, and we give out, is these, we call them blessed bands. They're little plastic or rubber bands that you wear on your wrist. It's got the bless acrostic. B is for be in prayer. Like, you got to stay connected to the God of the mission all the time. Listen. So where I'm starting to listen to you, if you're my neighbor, I care more about hearing your story than about telling you mine. I think a lot of times when it comes from Christians, we are so obsessed with sharing the gospel that we forget that there are entry points of the gospel that feed into people's lives. And if you look at, like, Jesus with the woman at the well, the first thing he told her wasn't that he was the Messiah. He led with a conversation about water, and then eventually it led to a point where he was able to speak into a place in her life that she could receive and respond to. And so listening is a big part of that. The E in bless is for eat. We're going to all eat 21 meals a week. What if we intentionally said we're going to have 2 or 3 of those meals and we're going to share those with someone who may be far from God? The first S is for serve. So as we're listening, as we're eating together, needs are arising, we're jumping in, we're serving. And then the last S is share. We're sharing our life, we're sharing the gospel, sharing what Jesus has done for us. And so we try to keep those things in front of our people, reminding them constantly of the mission. And then another thing that we do is we talk about helping people say yes to Jesus. So when they say yes, one of the things I often ask is, okay, what can Generation do? What can we do to help you take this step? Sometimes it's helping them acquire resources, or giving them a place to meet, or even just showing up and praying with them. Sometimes it's hanging with them in neighborhood or community things that they're doing. And so trying to just constantly keep them focused on the mission and looking out, and then coming alongside them when they are cultivating relationships. I think of one of the guys at Generation, his name is Tom Schmidt, and Tom and Regina do this probably better than anyone. They throw the best parties. Their street is full of people from neighboring streets and neighboring communities, and they literally will come and they'll have, for every holiday, they'll have 50 people gathered in their driveway, sharing a meal together, just celebrating life, being the hands and feet of Jesus, and when opportunity presents itself, even openly sharing what Jesus is doing in their life. And so we see a lot of those stories, and those are the things that we try to celebrate.
That's good. That's good stuff. And so I think about kind of where you and I, because here's the deal. It's not any credit to us, but kind of the idea of what we're talking about here, to churches living on mission together, really for me comes back to somebody who really helped frame that in Jimmy Carroll. When we were going to start here, somebody said, hey, if you're going to start a church, you need to go have coffee with this guy, Jimmy Carroll. And I didn't know Jimmy, had never met Jimmy. I called him, and immediately, a couple days later, we're meeting at Caribou Coffee, and he immediately kind of invites me in, and just anything I need that he has that we can use, he basically makes accessible to us and says, there's nothing we have that's not yours, and have access to that. And I know that he played a large part in your life. And tell us a little bit about the impact in kind of seeing the mission the way that you do, that was kind of impacted kind of from him, I guess we could say.
Yeah, so Jimmy Carroll hired me out of college. That was my first job. Hired me as a student pastor. I was, I think, 21 years old. And in fact, we just hired a guy to be our student pastor. That's a couple months younger than I was when Jimmy hired me. And but he was a mentor and a boss early on in our relationship. And I did a lot of dumb things. There were numerous times he kept me from getting fired. The lead pastor, the senior pastor, wanted to let me go a couple of times, and Jimmy would always say, well, no, like, I believe in Jarret. Let me talk to him. We'll figure this out. And so for a while it was boss, it was mentor, and then over the years it became more of a friendship, more of co-laborers in this mission. But he always, back from the very beginning, from 20 plus years ago when I met him for the first time, he was always a man that lived with a lot of clarity and focus when it came to the mission. And so it was always about the mission. The mission was always the most important thing. And when you're around someone like that, they say in leadership, things are more caught than taught. We sat down and we talked through structure and order and how to pastor a church and how to handle conflict and how to do weddings and funerals and all of those sort of day in, day out, like the nuts and bolts of ministry life. But what was always coming out of him, just being around him, was this passionate focus on the mission. And it's something I don't ever remember going, I want that. It's just something that gradually became a part of my life. And so over the course of the last 20 years until he passed away, I mean, anytime we were together, we would always have conversations about that. And it's filtered down into the way I live and the way I lead. And we talk about mission a lot. And anytime I meet with someone, I always ask them, what are you saying yes to? What's Jesus calling you to do? What's the next yes for you? And those are all things that I just not even learned, I just caught by being around Jimmy and having the access that he gave me to his life and the mentoring role that he played in my life.
Yeah, so as we're thinking about this podcast exists so that people can listen and kind of go, okay, here's something I can take and immediately apply into my disciple making. So we're just talking about a guy who has impacted both of our churches, and the way he did that was by inviting us in. Yeah. And so we got folks that are listening and saying, okay, hey, how can I hear this and make immediate application? And I think what I'm just hearing you say, if you want to know from my story, is this consistent inviting people in. It's there in the bless strategy. Yeah. It's there in what was modeled for us in Jimmy. Just this inviting people into our lives to model for them what it looks like to follow Jesus. Yeah. And I think that's one of the takeaways. If you're listening to this right now in your car on your way to work, be in prayer. Who can I invite in to work? Who can I invite in my neighborhood, into my life to model my life? And so, let's get back to kind of thinking through again as we kind of look to wrap this up, churches and church strategies and those kind of things. What are some practical ways that you think churches can partner together, though in different places, for gospel ministry?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things that can be done. One of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with a church in Raleigh called Life Point Church. Donnie Williams has become one of those voices that when Jimmy died, that left a void for me. And Donnie became one of those people that came alongside me and has spoken truth. If you know anything about Jimmy, and you do, Matt, Donnie says all of the same things that Jimmy said. He was just a lot nicer about it. Jimmy was just very direct, and you would leave oftentimes with your feelings hurt, feeling like he just beat you up, only to realize on the car on the way home, no, I needed to hear that. And so Donnie says all those same things, just a little more sugar with it. But we're partnering with Life Point, doing a thing in 2022 called Devoted, and getting back to the book of Acts, the greatest disciple-making movement, that the early church, Acts 2, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to community, and to prayer. And so we're breaking down 2022 and doing this together. By the first third of the year is the apostles' teaching. The second third, the focus is going to be community. And then the final third of the year is prayer. And so we'll do some things together along the way, focusing on community, maybe even we've talked about doing a worship night together. And so some of those things where you can gather together to worship. I think sharing resources is another way, like you were talking about with Jimmy. Like at Generation, anytime a pastor calls me and says, hey, I did one of the one-day talk at Refuel in Raleigh, and a guy I ran into at the Refuel in Lynchburg a few weeks ago says, hey, that message you did at the one day, are you okay if I take that and share it with my guys? And I was like, 100%, I'll send you my notes. So sharing resources, things that we're either creating or we're getting from others. I also think doing things along the way. We've done this before. We partnered for, I think it was Impact Week is what it was called at the time, and getting our people together to serve alongside one another without feeling threatened. Like if we do something and it's an event that like the source or the place that we gather is at Passage, it's not like I'm telling our people don't go there. You can't go in that building. We're part of the same team, so this is just another opportunity to make an impact for the kingdom. And hey, if they come here and love what is happening here and connect with a few people that are part of Passage, if it's ultimately going to help them be more effective at making disciples, then like by all means leave Generation and come and be a part of this, So I think there's a lot of ways that you can accomplish that.
Yeah, I think what we've already talked about, we have, as believers in the world, we have an enemy.
Yeah.
We just can't be deceived to think that a brother or sister who attends another church is it,
exactly.
Right? And so they are not the enemy. They are brothers, sisters, co-laborers in the gospel.
Yeah.
And so we need to see them that way, and we need to see other churches in our area that way. And they are not the enemy, and they are a friend, and we want to move forward on mission with them in those ways. And so just encourage folks listening to this as you consider what's it look like for you to live on mission in your neighborhood. Maybe no one from the Pastor's Church lives in your neighborhood, but maybe someone from Generation does live in your neighborhood. Yeah. Listen, you're hearing Jarret and I say, hey, you guys combine forces for the sake of the gospel in the neighborhood and where you live, and get after the mission together. And so, well, that's great. And Jarret, I appreciate you taking time to come in and talk a little bit about this and kind of encourage our folks to do some of the things that you've already talked about. As we wrap up here, as we do with every single person that comes on the podcast, we ask for a recommendation either from a book you're reading or music you're listening to or both.
Okay. Book I'm reading right now is 50 Shades of Grey.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Future Church is one. Whether it's a pastor or someone that's not even, I wouldn't say, we're all ministers. So as ministers of the gospel, that's a great book. And then another one we're going through with the pastors in our LCN group. Phenomenal book. I'd recommend it to anyone. But Emotionally Healthy Discipleship by Pete Scazzaro is a great resource. And then my music recommendation right now, I'm all about Christmas. I know it's not Thanksgiving yet, and so if you don't like it, that's fine. You can stop listening. But A Legendary Christmas by John Legend is a great album to listen to. So check that
Legendary Christmas.
Legendary Christmas.
Yeah, Future Church and Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. I have got Future Church. I haven't started into it yet, so I need to. But enjoying Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. Hey, listen.
Eddie Money's another good one to listen to anytime.
Who's that?
Eddie Money.
Eddie
all
Money?
Year round, 80s. People on this who know who Eddie Money is, you need to come to Generation because you're being led astray by that.
Hey, don't say that, man. My wife is the biggest 80s music fan that I know.
You don't know who Eddie Money is?
And so I'm sure I know because she listens to it all the time. 80s all the time.
Oh my gosh.
But wow. I'm sure that's what it is. Hey, look, you can, Jarrett's a little older than I am, I think. So that's probably it. But
how old are you?
I'm 43.
I'm literally less than a year older than you.
See?
So like you should know who Eddie Money is.
Jarret is older than I am.
Right. Well, if you're listening to this, send Matt pictures of Eddie Money albums, get him some music. We need to get him cultured.
All right, that sounds good. Hey, right now it's the holidays, it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas. It's a great time to live on mission with family.
Yes,
real quick, we're going to talk about this at church, but we have got an opportunity for you to do this with your family. We have got books that are available called It's Christmas Unbelievable by Rebecca McLaughlin. They are $1 a piece, and so we didn't want to give them away because you'll just come by, grab a handful, and they'll stay in your car for a year. So they're $1 a piece. You got to pay the big bucks, but just think of the family members you would like to get this into their hands over the holidays and then follow up with them. Read it with them, follow up with them. But you're going to have the opportunity of being around a lot of people who probably don't know Jesus over the next month. And so let's begin to pray how God can use that time intentionally with those people that we're around. So, Jarret, thanks a lot for joining us.
You bet.
All right, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. Seeing you at church soon or join us on another P3D podcast.